COVID and what will be in terms of the future will look like post-COVID scenario. So today I have with me an extreme set of panelists who will be running through their various perspectives of how the supply chain is going to be looking like technology and steps to secure the supply chain, which is very vital from our current standpoint. So we would have, I will just basically give you a broad overview of what's going to happen today. So we're going to have individual presentation on that. And we will have a question answer session. And I would encourage you to all write your questions, send in your questions through the Q&A box that you will find on your screen. And we will try and ensure that we will answer as many questions as possible. And mind you, we just got 1 hour, so we'll squeeze in as much as we can. So without discussion, that I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Nakul Pasricha, who's a president, Authentication Solution Providers Association. So Nakul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mani, and good morning to all my fellow panelists, as well as all the attendees who have taken time to join this webinar. I think it's a very important topic that we have today in terms of securing the supply chain with technology and standards. My esteemed co-panelists will be talking about various implications of that, but I thought I would start a little bit by talking about some of the challenges that we have in our supply chain and what are the issues that can happen because of it. As we know, a strong, healthy, and secure supply chain is the cornerstone of any industry and perhaps of any economy. In India, we have our own unique challenges in the supply chain, such as fragmentation, such as infrastructure and logistical issues. And these problems can be exacerbated by the kind of crisis that we are undergoing today, where supply is squeezed and demand is just as high as before, or maybe even higher than before for certain kinds of products, including medical products. So it's a very important topic, and I thought that what I would start with doing is just talking about some of the statistics. What are some of the problems that can happen when supply chains are compromised and when they can be infiltrated by counterfeit or spurious, you may choose to term it, or substandard products, or where products are diverted from the location where they are intended to other locations. So bear with me, I'm just going to share a short presentation. I hope you can see my screen.
Absolutely.
Great. So what is the economic impact of counterfeiting worldwide and in India? The value of counterfeit and pirated goods in 2013 was $1.13 trillion and is forecast to be 2.81, close to $3 trillion by 2022, which is not that far away. The displacement of legitimate economic activity as well is projected to be about $1.2 trillion. In India, the loss of employment, these are FICCI statistics, 1.6 million jobs that are being lost because of counterfeiting. That's a huge number in a country where we are obviously trying to provide meaningful, gainful employment for a large population. The economic loss in terms of lost sales to industry, about 1 lakh crores or $1 trillion. If I talk about some of the other statistics that are not on this slide, the percentage of products that we buy every day that could be counterfeit. Auto parts, how many of us go and replace auto parts? You may have a brake pad that is being replaced. You may have other parts that are being replaced aftermarket. In automobile spare parts, the industry's own statistics show up to about 1/3 of aftermarket spare parts that you're buying could be counterfeit. FMCG, a study shows 30% counterfeiting. Agricultural products, seeds, fertilizers, we all know how important agriculture is to our economy, could be up to 60 or 70%. And when it comes to pharmaceuticals, The statistics vary, and I will not go into kind of some of the various interpretations or questions that arise on that, but some international studies have shown up to even 10% of medicines that we are buying could be spurious or substandard. So it's a huge problem, and the statistics show kind of the extent of that. So what are we to do about this? Well, there are a lot of ways to protect the supply chain. As the title of the webinar today suggests, it happens through standardization. My friend Swami from GS1 is going to be talking very shortly about the importance of standards. But when we talk about kind of some of the technologies, Marcel is going to be talking about it a little later in the presentation. But what I'd like to say is that essentially securing the supply chain means being able to trace where products are in the supply chain, and when you have the product in your hand, being able to verify that what you have is indeed a genuine product. And there are various technologies for it. One of the terms that is used is traceability. Traceability is nothing more than being able to trace where the product originated from and is it where it's intended to be. This is something that can help gain insight and secure supply chains. It's already being adopted around the world to secure pharmaceutical supply chains, agriculture supply chains, even tobacco supply chains. And the standards that are being used, as I mentioned, Mr. Swaminathan is going to be talking about in a minute. When it comes to India, and when I talk about kind of one of the subjects that is quite close to my heart and that should be very important for us today, is medicines or medical products. We do have regulations to secure products that are being exported from India, but unfortunately we don't have any regulation to secure products that are being distributed domestically. And I think that is something that should be addressed at the earliest, because the health of our own citizens, of our own patients, is obviously paramount for everyone. I want to, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I want to just show you a couple more slides before I yield the floor and to my panelists, and certainly in the middle, if there are any questions, Mani is going to help take those, and I can answer them at the appropriate time. First, I'm not sure if you can see this slide. The kind of text is very small, but this is showing just the reported incidence of counterfeiting related to products that are essential for COVID-19, okay, such as masks, PPE kits, sanitizers. Over the country, you can see the map where it's shaded. That's where the incidents have been reported. A darker shade reports more incidents. You have 5,000 hand sanitizers seized in Gurugram. You have 2 lakh fake sanitizers in Mumbai. You have masks and sanitizers in Telangana. So it's a problem that counterfeiters are very adept at kind of making worse and adept at taking advantage of an opportunity. And that is why we must be really alert. Now, I talked about traceability as a way to help secure the supply chain. But really, if I step back, I want to close with kind of what are some of the things that the various stakeholders in protecting supply chains or in protecting ourselves can do. And that really, I bucket into 4 categories. We have regulators, brand owners, consumers, which is, you can say, the providers, doctors and nurses in healthcare institutions. And you have, generally, you can take it as consumers. So what regulators can do is encourage, incentivize manufacturers of genuine products to adopt measures to protect supply chains and to prevent counterfeiting. And those incentives can be in the form of tax incentives. It can be in the form of kind of, where there are price controls on certain products, those can be considered. But there must be certain incentives that are given to industry. Secondly, awareness of counterfeiting amongst law enforcement and amongst consumers. That is a job that only a government can do. You cannot expect every brand in the country to go out and generate that level of awareness that will spread across a country of 135 crore people. You cannot expect solution providers to do it, and consumers, of course, can be self-aware. But really, when it comes to the strength of the government's platform that it has to raise awareness, it is unparalleled. And then thirdly, what regulators or governments can do is train enforcement people so that they can help identify what is a genuine product and what is not a genuine product in the supply chain. When it comes to brand owners, they must invest in authentication solutions and in securing supply chains. I talked about traceability. There are many physical solutions available. There are different kind of overt and covert solutions. I'm not going into the technology. There will be an example of the technology that will come a little later in the webinar. But there are many different technologies available to secure products and secure supply chains. Brand owners must support law enforcement and of course should engage and should receive that kind of support from law enforcement as well, should educate law enforcement in terms of this is how you identify my genuine product. Okay, and then brands should also do their own enforcement activities that can support government activities. There are security agencies, there are ways to go conduct raids on counterfeiters, there are ways to do inspections in the private market as well as through the public initiatives, and I think brand owners should take those initiatives as well. When it comes to the health stuff, this applies for obviously the medical products and aspect of the supply chain. Doctors and nurses are kind of at the forefront of it. So we must motivate them, we must educate them, we must get them engaged in terms of detecting anomalies in the supply chain. And they can help patients in identifying what are genuine products and what could be a substandard or spurious. So their education and their involvement can really strengthen these efforts.
Great.
And then lastly, when we come to patients or consumers, we must buy products from genuine sources. We must insist on a bill. How many of us insist on a bill when we go and buy medicines? It is your right as a consumer. Chances of getting a counterfeit product in the absence of any technology or any kind of solution, your chances of getting a substandard spurious product go up drastically if you're not forcing the retailer to give you a bill that can be attributed to that retailer if there is a problem. We should authenticate products at the point of purchase. There are already several solutions that are available on products. So subject to the awareness issue, I think one of the challenges we have in the country is awareness. But through the efforts of many brands that have taken initiatives, as well as solution providers that have partnered with brands, there are authentication solutions available. So where there is something, you must take the initiative to authenticate it. And when there is a problem, please take that extra step to report it to a brand owner saying, look, I suspect that there could be an issue. Can you help me resolve this issue? Or I bought a product, it doesn't seem to be working. Even my healthcare providers seem to think there might be an issue. Can you help me detect if I have been the victim of counterfeiting? So through a combined consolidated effort, I think we can make inroads into tackling the issue, which is a huge one and one of the biggest kind of challenges that I see in terms of the building healthy, strong supply chain. So I'll close with that and hand the floor back to Mani for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nakul. So it's a fantastic insight that you're giving us, and also I'm just amazed at the amount of counterfeit products that is still flooding the country. So all the more reason for us actually to use technology and standards. Thank you for that. So before I move on to the poll, there's been a couple of questions saying, look, will you be sending the link of this video of this webinar? We'll be sharing. The answer is yes. We will share it by email by tomorrow. And for all those who have registered, you will get us a link on this quite shortly. Before we move on to our next panelist, Mr. J. P. Dwivedi, I'm going to ask Anjali to please run our first poll question. Anjali, can you please run the first poll question for us, please?
Yes, sir. So this question would be for 30 seconds.
Yeah. All right. I hope you're getting some answers in. Ranjani, do we have the results?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we had identification and authentication technologies will emerge strongly post COVID-19. 45% of you say you strongly agree. I probably will be on the strongly agree area as well. And 47% of them say we agree. 7% is not sure, 1% disagree. So I think the overwhelming majority says that identification and authentication technologies will clearly emerge strongly post COVID-19. Thank you. Thank you for your answers. And moving on to our next panelist. This is Mr. J.P. Dwivedi, who's Chief Information Officer of the Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute and Research Center. Please, can I have Mr. Dwivedi present? Thank you. Welcome, sir. You need to unmute yourself. Mr. Dwivedi, yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me bring my presentation quickly on screen. Okay. So, in the context of hospitals, first, what all constitutes supply chain? Very briefly, it's a common sense, but it brings the context for. So, first and foremost is pharmacy, medicines and consumables, OT material, laboratory material, reagents, consumables there, radiology, all the contrasts, films, CDs, DVDs. Then in wards for nurses, we need disinfectants, syringes, cannulas, pumps, gloves, masks, etc. In the OPDs, we need gloves for examination, masks, particularly PPE kits in these days. And in general, F&B, linen, soap, stationery, computers, electrical items, peripherals, all these constitute a whole supply chain requirement to continue running a hospital, right? So first and foremost, challenge is to find credible source of suppliers and maintain a strong database, so that we can secure firm arrangement of supply as per our requirement. The next is accurately predicting the procurement needs to avoid emergency purchases. Because number one, as previous panelist Nakul said, where the need for urgent requirement comes, we get susceptible to obtain some spurious supplies. Then again, shortlisting the approval window, shortening the approval window. So when somebody has raised the supply purchase requisition, if the window is very long itself, then it will cause a delay. So automation from the purchase requisition to the purchase order process. Then delivery tracking and expeditious inward goods process. So when the delivery has been made, where the delivery is there in the pipeline, and how fast I can complete my nation quality assurance and then bring the delivery on board. Faster vendor payment, that is very important, because if we don't maintain that good payment history, we will not get good suppliers and prompt supplies. And then ultimately measuring and recording the history of the quality and timeliness of deliveries, because we need to continuously feed back to our supplier database and make sure that we have quality suppliers, we have credible and firm arrangements with them, we have rate contracts with them already agreed. We use various technologies at various stages to make sure that our process, our workflow is unhindered. And in case of emergencies like this, we get extra vigilant, extra careful, plan properly for the reorder levels, adjust and tweak the reorder levels, so that in case there is a disruption for a few weeks, our operations will not be affected. patient care is something which actually deals with lives. It doesn't deal so much with material or profit and loss. So we must be very careful while having solid uninterrupted supply chain. And at the same time, we must ensure that the supplies that are coming adhere to the standards in quality that are required to make our patients get well soon. So basically, these are the basic essentials that any hospital or healthcare organization needs to take care while maintaining the supply chain here. And we at Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute apply all the necessary technologies, having SAP as our ERP system that actually takes care of each and every aspect of the supply chain management. So with this, leaving to you, Mani, with any questions?
Yep. I quite like what you're saying in terms of the way that you are looking at the supply chain in terms of the hospital environment pretty quickly. So next, we're moving on to the next panelist, Mr. S. Swaminathan, Chief General Manager of GS1 India, and to take the stage and to present his thoughts on this, please.
Maybe
Mr. Dwivedi, if you can please.
Very good morning to all the participants. The current situation has made us realize how interdependent we are in terms of supply chain. Apart from several health and humanitarian crises which are caused by the coronavirus pandemic, business across the world today face enormous challenges. The collapse of customer demand, significant regulatory changes that are happening around, economic recession, increased uncertainty, and very important is the supply chain disruptions that are happening around. And also supply chains are becoming more complex the day by day, and some of the challenges which includes because of a clear visibility into the movement of goods through the supply chain. If you look at, they all operate in silos. So interoperability is a very key issue of it. And then lack of common identification. During the next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about the role that we play and also by the government and the industry towards it. So just give me a few seconds, I'll just share my screen. Are you able to see that screen?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
Go ahead.
As we all say that, for a standards are very important for securing the supply chain. If you look at today, between in any verticals, the competition between any two retailers or airline or brands is exactly not individual. It is the entire chain. It's between the entire supply chain across onto that. So they say that there's a saying like the chain is only as strong as the weakest link. So I'm going to talk about three pillars which are very, very important for the secure supply chain. If you could see on the top, left, there are 4 icons, which are there. Identify, capture, share. So in terms of it, like, these are very, very key 3 pillars which are very much required there. In terms of identify, what it does is it provides identify to the real world entities so that the information can be stored electronically and unambiguously to various items, like in terms of a logistic unit or a physical location document. All these could be uniquely identified. In terms of even at the logistic level, there are various levels of packaging which goes. So there is a, typically like what we usually identify in a today a citizen or anything through a Aadhaar, for the services. Similarly, each of the product, if you look at, there is a code represented in the form of a barcode or a RFID tag, which is used to identify that. So there are more than 100 keys which are used to identification across. Second, very, very important thing is the capture part. If you talk about a supply chain, in terms of it has to be faster, accurate, and reliable. So out of the several capture technologies that are there, the barcoding and the RFID, which my fellow panelist is going to talk about, Marcel, about that. So they play a very, very important role in terms of it to make sure that to bridge the physical and the world of electronic information, which is there. The third very important part is the data exchange. Typically look at, like, for example, when you get an invoice, the various formats in which you receive an invoice, right? How difficult it is to and complex it is to process. Similarly, in terms of a purchase order or there. So what has GS1 done? GS1 has developed certain guidelines along with EDIFACT to develop data exchange standards, which are used by directly between the various trading partners across it. So this is in terms of the three pillars of it. Now coming back to, I'm today or the situation and also of the other panelists, coming from the healthcare sector. I just wanted to, as Nakul mentioned, this is also very, very close to our hearts because we have been working in this domain, healthcare domain, for the last 2 decades in India, globally for the last 3 decades onto that. So in today's situation in the healthcare sector has been facing immense challenges in meeting some of the requirements. There are 2-3 factors which I feel which is there. As Nakul mentioned, I completely agree and endorse that view on counterfeiting things which are happening around. And other important thing is the visibility. Today, like for example, there is a poor visibility, supply chain visibility, which makes difficult for companies to track and track the goods. This is happening due to this. If we are experiencing a lot of shortages, in terms of it also to distinguish between the counterfeit and other products across, which is there. So it has put at a higher risk also. And other important thing, if you look at from the pharmaceutical, the complete, chain is, as I said in my opening remarks, in terms of it, we are all interdependent. Today, most of the raw materials we are depending on the other countries like China and a few other countries onto that. So this has clearly separated and there is no visibility of what is the inventory lying around. Today, for example, if you want to, this is what we have been addressing through some of our joint initiatives with the regulators and government, saying that, there has to be one common in terms of a database, one single version of truth for all product information of cataloging. For example, today, I don't think anybody has got an idea of, if you ask what are the various types of medicines and generic medicine available across, and we don't have a national catalog in place. Similarly, across the visibility of stocks lying across the country, even for a manufacturer beyond the tier 2 level, it becomes extremely difficult for them to know what is stock lying where onto that. So this requires a clear visibility onto that. The the regulators have taken a lot of initiative. Today, for example, all the exports that has been done in the pharma sector follow a common standards for it across, right from the manufacturing till the point of exports, and then at the later point in some other countries, it's used at the point of dispensing on that. So what it happens is when you have a national repository which is there, which all the manufacturers load by a simple scan or through an app, you can really authenticate the counterfeit and there. So it has been predominantly used in the healthcare sector for the medical devices. So if you have a common, in terms of data in terms of for the medical devices, the repository, it becomes easy for the stakeholders across the chain in terms of hospitals to make sure that the treatment given to the customer is safe and secure onto that, which is there. Apart from the healthcare sector, predominantly the other sectors where standards are being placed in, or the retail sector. The retail, in terms of the retail sector, we are seeing a lot of challenges, especially now. If you look at in terms of the supply chain has really disrupted the retail, except few products are not available in stock. The raw material cost minimization is there, and also with the emergence of online, it has become the supply chain more complex onto that. which is there. And also traceability is becoming a very, very important thing. What we have taken in the step towards the direction we have done is, we have created a national catalog for retail products there. Today we have close to around 10 million products in our repository. So if you see on the top right-hand corner, you can see an icon, it's called Smart Consumer App. That means by just a simple scan of a barcode which is there on the product, you get all relevant information on the product. So that is what is very, very important. So for example, at the later stage, if it is required to be a recall, everything could be activated to that. If those things need to be required, then you need to have the entire industry needs to have a common, follow a common standard onto that, which is there. Recall there. Third, third thing which is very, very important, which I said, there are several use cases which are, one is related to the truck optimization and logistic planning an efficient truck to logistic and efficiency. If you look at most of the time, the trucks go either half filled or half empty onto that. And then you could see the carton sizes of various regular shape and size. So where standards could play a very important role on that. As I said, the track and trace is a very, very important thing. Then we also talk about reverse logistics, and then on-time delivery, which is there. Even when I talk about in the railway, there is a visibility. For example, we are working with the Ministry of Railways and Chris, where every wagon is individually identified, through a sort of an RFID tag, which is captured across, so that you have a clear visibility of the wagon movement, coach movement across the country. And similarly for the tag which you are using, earlier what used to happen is, there were several operators which used to have their own proprietary way of identifying, for the tolls and everything. Now one single tag of fast tag, where standards are very, very, have been used. Similarly, the Delhi, Goa and few of the excise, they all use for liquor traceability, the standards onto that. Defense, we have been trying to do a lot of project onto the ammunition tracking, as well as also on the food traceability, which is there. And so these are things which are happening around. And second, very important thing which I wanted to highlight about the e-commerce, if you look at the logistic part, it is across vertical, right? In the e-commerce space, one of the first way to detect a counterfeit is we run a service called Validate. That means by looking at the product code, we have 112 countries repository connected to that. So you can know whether the product code is valid and who owns this product or the brand. So that is the first level of authentication that we do, which is there. So these are some of the things that we have in place. Wanted to highlight is we also have a collaborative platform, especially we have started with the FMCG, where the industry come together, all the stakeholders of retailers, logistic providers, as well as also the brand, come and try to address some of the common challenges in the supply chain and logistics. So this has been in formulation for the last 14 months, and we have done various work stream projects onto that, which is there. The other important thing which I wanted to highlight is there is a draft paper which has come on the national logistics, which they claim that 12 to 14% of our GDC, which they want to minimize and bring it to 8 to 10, which is the overall global average part of it. This is the case. We have the standards has to play a very, very important part of it. So with that, I would like to hand over to Mr. Mani to take any questions at the last. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swami. I think it was quite informative. So before I move on to the next panelist, Mr. Girish, I would like to open the next poll. So we're going to have this poll is on identification and authentication technologies will strengthen the supply chain post-COVID. So, Anjali, can you please run this poll for us?
Yes, sir.
All right, so I'll give you 30 seconds. All right, let's see. So the question is, identification and authentication technologies will emerge strongly post-COVID-19.
I think this is
first question.
Yeah,
just
check that,
second
please.
question, please. Yeah. So identification and authentication technologies will strengthen the supply chain management post COVID-19. All right, I'll give you more 30 more.
So we'll end the poll.
Yes, please. Can you end the poll for us? All right, can you just show us the results? All right, I think the results are strongly agree. 54% of you say you strongly agree. 41% of you say you agree, and 5% is not sure. So I think the overwhelming majority says that the identification authentication technologies will strengthen supply chain management post COVID-19. Thank you for that, Anjali. And moving on to our next panelist, who is Mr. Girish Koppar, who is the GM of IT department, Wockhardt Hospital, Mumbai. So I'm sure being in the front line of what's happening right now, we'll be quite keen to hear from you, Mr. Girish. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mani. Good morning to the fellow panelists and users. So I'll just quickly pull up my presentation screen. I'll be talking more on the application side because my fellow panelists have already spoken why supply chain is important, the importance of supply chain. And I think this lockdown has actually taught us why the supply chain is important, because we are struggling to have inventory in our own houses comparing to this lockdown. So my perspective would be a little different, because a lot of technical thing is spoken about by Mr. Tanmay and Mr. Swaminathan earlier. And also my fellow colleague, Mr. Jay, has highlighted the points, what are the important items which needs to be maintained, and what is the cost. The cost is the life of a patient, that the cost is too high. So I just will move on to my first slide. I'll just bring up the challenges faced by the hospital during this crisis. See, maintaining the supply chain in a normal scenario is different, and in a crisis scenario where there is a logistic issue, people and vendors are not able to move around freely, trucks are not allowed, especially if your hospital is in containment zone. So it becomes very difficult for the logistics to move around and to cater that thing. Secondly, as rightly pointed out, there's a lot of spurious equipment in terms of your sanitizers, which is being sold, and there's a severe shortage of PPE devices, that is your patient protection equipment, because when there is a crisis, we don't have a choice, what to buy, when to buy, whatever is available, we need to buy. So that supply chain concept needs to be a little bit goes for a toss, because we can't follow the processes as defined before the crisis. And secondly, maintaining inventory, like even if we have received any material, there is staff is a big issue, because some of the key staff, say the purchase department, may not be able to travel to the respective hospitals to do a GRN, to raise a PO, and also that is also a big challenge. And because of all this, a lot of pressure on the hospital IT is to allow people to work from home. And the last challenge which the hospital as a business is facing, there is no or very low footfall in hospitals for OPD, patients, because most of the hospitals who are admitting COVID-19 patients have literally stopped their OPD consultations due to the scare that it may spread to the other people. So these are the basic challenges which the hospital as a business and as IT we are facing. So I move on to the next slide. So how are we managing these challenges? Okay. So as an IT department, again, my perspective would be more from the IT department. So how do I ensure a business continuity plan for my department, like giving a key access to people to work from home? Now, again, this work from home is a totally new concept, which was not there previously, and people don't have the etiquettes, or they don't know how to work from home. There's a cyber security issue. So people need to be trained how to work from home. This is also a very big problem because not everybody has a laptop in their home. They carry a laptop. They don't have a good internet connectivity, or my firewall doesn't allow an X number of people to be given access to work from home. Now, second is because my staff is not able to go to the hospitals, I need to have a redundancy. And these should be able to be managed remotely. If I have redundancy, this can be very well managed remotely. So this is again a BCP plan from the IT department of creating redundancy for PCs and printers. Thirdly, now as a business, because the hospital is suffering a business loss due to no or extremely to have an e-consultation, because people who are sick and they need help. So e-consultation, how do I start e-consultation? When I start e-consultation, again, there's a challenge. How do I charge the customer? Because my staff is not trained to connect the doctor. There's a privacy issue. There are other medical legal aspects which need to be taken into consideration. So e-consultation, starting e-consultation, training my frontline staff, training my doctors, how to use the technology to do e-consultation. And lastly, which I mentioned is all these things puts a very big load on my firewalls and the cyber security system, because it is vulnerable to cyber attacks. I think now all these cyber criminals are very active. They know that there are a lot of leakages and easy vulnerable plays. So they're always on the lookout for any such instance where they can enter the system and get valuable data. So this was from a hospital perspective, and from the IT perspective, how are we managing? Because the key point is, even if we have processes set in place, we don't have the people, because ultimately people manage processes. If we, in the absence of people, how do we manage? So this is for my perspective, how do I ensure a BCP in terms of the IT department, and also from the business point of view, how do I continue the business through e-consultation and telemedicine maybe tomorrow, because this is going to be tomorrow's perspective, because people have now experienced how is it good to use technology, how is it cost saving, and it is really beneficial to the hospital as an organization to use technology and leverage to save cost and expand the business. So Mani, this was from my side. Any other questions?
Yeah, I will definitely come back to you. I've got some interesting questions my way for you, but thank you for that, Mr. Girish. So moving on to our final panelist for his remarks. I'm quite excited to hear about this in terms of how do you secure supply chains with RFID. I'm going to hand it over to Marcel Coté, who's the Director of Intelligent Labels and RFID at Avery, Dennison Intelligent Labels in Asia Pacific. He joins us from Australia. Thank you, Mr. Marcel, for joining in. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Manny. And hello, everyone. I hope you're staying safe and well in your homes. Yes, my pleasure to talk a bit about the solutions here. Obviously, the panelists have talked in some detail about the challenges and the market need for secure supply chains within the healthcare industry. So I'm going to talk a little bit from a solutions perspective and specifically talk about how Avery Dennison's RFID solutions help to enable healthcare supply chain security. So I've only prepared one slide, but I want to go through some detail. Just very briefly, just introduce who we are, Avery Dennison, a bit about the technology, RFID, and then more importantly, talk about how RFID is helping brands within the healthcare industry secure their supply chains. So very quickly, you may know Avery Dennison, particularly in India, as being the leader in pressure-sensitive label materials. But you may not be aware that we are also the world leader in UHF RFID manufacturing as well, and partner all the global retail brands, particularly who have used RFID for a number of years. We have the broadest portfolio across many different types of RFID, from ultra high frequency to near field communication solutions. Renowned for our proven scale, execution ability, and over 15 years of experience manufacturing and supplying RFID solutions. We have a global manufacturing footprint. We manufacture in 6 regions around the world. And we've also opened up a series of what we call iLabs, which are basically demonstration and training facilities to help brand owners purely understand what RFID means to them and how they can adopt RFID to resolve their issues. And pleased to say we opened one in Pune, India last year. So hopefully everyone will find the time after this session to contact us and come and see for yourselves how RFID really works. We really do pride ourselves on quality and product consistency with 6 R&D facilities around the world. And consistency is very key to how RFID can be used and for brand owners to truly get the benefits and the ROI when adoption. So let me talk about RFID, which is basically an acronym that stands for Radio Frequency Identification, which is the wireless transfer to and from electronic tags or labels. You can see the top left-hand corner, I've added a little illustration of a typical RFID label, which consists of a microchip, which is basically the size of the pinhead, very, very small. That contains all the data. Then you have an antenna, which is connected to the chip, which acts like a TV antenna that helps to send the signal and transmit the data from the tag itself. And then finally, you have the carrier, which is either a paper or a polyester that holds it all together. That's the typical construction of what an RFID product looks like. And typically an RFID product is actually hidden or part of the packaging or label construction. So the consumer would typically not be aware that there's an RFID tag being used on their product. These RFID tags, which are so much different to a barcode label, electronically store a lot of data and a unique ID for each of those items. The data itself, the electronic data, could be as much as procurement information from the source of the raw materials that we use to manufacture the healthcare product, all the information related to the production of the product itself, right the way through the distribution and supply chain, and even information relating to shelf life and expiration of that product. So a lot more information can be contained in the very small microchip contained within the RFID tag. Typically, to actually to interact and communicate with the RFID tag, you need a RFID reader or a fixed reader or a handheld reader. Similar to what barcode reader looks like, but it's used to actually wake up and alert the tag, and that tag will send the data to that reader or device with all the information that's contained within. So we call them passive RFID tags, and over time, the cost of these products has come down significantly to a point where we see many global and even local brands across retail, apparel, healthcare in particular, food now and logistics, major companies, small companies, actually adopting RFID at the item level so that every product that they supply and produce through their supply chain is tracked with RFID. That's a little bit about the technology. Let me talk about actual benefits of RFID, specifically in the healthcare supply chain. So for sure, the one key driver for RFID adoption in healthcare is to improve visibility and the accuracy of the tracking of the products. And my panelists have also talked about that as a specific need to improve visibility across the supply chain from every checkpoint along the way. What RFID enables the brand owner to do is to really reduce the amount of packaging errors or packing errors caused by the humans that typically manually enter the data and track that data. RFID very quickly and immediately upon receipt of goods highlights and reduces the errors upon delivery. One of the reasons it can do that is because, unlike a barcode, RFID enables the user to read the contents of not only the pallet, but even down to the carton level, every single item that's contained within the shipment through any stage of the supply chain, without the need for direct line of sight. Meaning that, say a checkpoint, a producer of a healthcare product has produced and supplied to a hospital or supplied to a distributor. At that point, the distributor can actually instantly check with a reader, either a handheld or fixed reader, what is actually being received in those goods without the need to break the pallet open, without the need to open the carton and inspect every item to cross-check. So it's very accurate and very efficient. And much faster in terms of the ability to check the inventory or check the stock, more than 12 times faster than traditional barcode. So much more efficient, much more accurate, and confirm information. The good news too, and my last point on the top center here, is that over time we've been able to develop RFID tags and labels for just about every application. A few years ago, it was impossible to actually tag a product that contained liquid or was made of metal. We've overcome that with innovation and development. To a point, liquid or a product containing liquid or even metal assets, and particularly metal devices and medical devices, I should say, within the healthcare industry. Specifically on the security side of supply chain, and again, referring to healthcare as a segment, for sure there's an issue with counterfeit drugs. We heard the statistics earlier. For India alone, it's significant. The good thing about having an RFID label on a medicine or a specific healthcare product, it does prevent, and it's been one of many solutions used in combination to prevent counterfeiting of drugs entering a legitimate distribution channel. There's a large Korean pharma company called Hanmi Healthcare that has been using RFID for this purpose for close to 10 years. They use it to avoid the product diversion risk. This grey market scenario where products from the manufacturer, say Hanmi in this case, supply through the distribution chain, but someone along that journey is actually then selling their product in a different market at a different price point, and without RFID, there's really no visibility. RFID, because of the unique identification on every product, can be checked and verified that the product being sold is supposed to be sold in that specific market. It reduces the leakage of controlled products and drugs. And of course, when you have unique ID and you have that ability to trace right the way back to the production and even the source of the supply, it enables faster product recalls, which is a huge advantage in the event that there's a crisis. And finally, reduces consumer risk due to expiration and temperature abuse. And just want to mention that RFID is not just for traceability. It can also be linked to solutions that we have regarding time temperature sensing, where a product's supply chain temperature can be monitored throughout that supply chain and verified at the point of consumption that the product is safe to use. And just moving, just as a bit of a summary, I suppose, to the right-hand side here. Typical healthcare use cases. I looked around the world and a lot of the work that we've been doing for many years why do healthcare brands use RFID? And for sure, very compelling user benefits around track and trace, inventory management, and even consumer engagement. I've probably spoke to a bunch of these benefits already, but just at a very high level, and just to reiterate, patient safety, as we heard today from our panelists, is critical and probably one of the most important areas of supply chain security. Eliminating human errors is a huge contributor sometimes to patients being at risk. So by shifting or adding RFID on top of the traditional 2D codes as an additional layer of security, definitely can improve patient safety. It can also add a level of authentication and anti-counterfeiting. in addition to, say, a void label or another solution, you add in the digital data and a unique ID, you can actually really secure and protect that product. And I should say, within the broad range of RFID solutions, there is an ability to encrypt and encode and even lock the data in that RFID tag. So only the brand owner can check and verify, and no one can overwrite that data if anyone tried to anti-counterfeit or to counterfeit the product. So of course, brand protection is a big one, as I talked about, avoiding grey markets. Medical device tracking, again, being metal has always been a challenge in the past, not anymore. RFID can be used to apply to metal devices. Here in India, there are companies that are already moving into RFID specifically for traceability and visibility and accuracy of the supply chain. One reason is because of the value of these products and also the counterfeiting issues that are present. Inventory management, I talked a little bit about the fact that you don't need a direct line of sight. For sure, it's more efficient. The accuracy that global brands are seeing are in the range of 99.9% versus barcode or 2D codes, which could be anywhere between 70 and 80% accurate. So in terms of our healthcare industry, I think accuracy is very, very important. And it's great to see that other industries like retail apparel are experiencing and enjoying that high level of accuracy. Real-time stock checking and replenishment. Again, this is something where, and I'll give you an example in Thailand, we have a customer that's supplying hospitals with a bunch of consumable goods. Every item is being RFID tagged. It's actually going into an RFID cabinet, and at the hospital, when anyone consumes, takes the product out of the cabinet, that automatically, that movement of goods gets triggered to the cloud in the back-end software, and that triggers a replenishment order on the vendor. That's very visible from both the supplier and the hospital in this case, and it's all enabled by RFID technology. That's something I honestly believe is going to really scale up quickly as more and more people get educated and understand the benefits. And recall management I talked about. And just finally, I just want to mention, once you use RFID on a product at an item level, particularly a consumer good, there is the ability to then engage with the consumer themselves. The consumer can use their smartphone and actually tap the product and get linked to the digital online content that brand owner, the healthcare brand, want to promote to that consumer. Even to the point, because we're at item level, we have a unique ID on the product, the consumer can then be given advice on to how to utilize that medicine safely or provide some additional consultation benefits moving forward. So this is kind of the next big visionary state that once you're RFID enabled, you can do much, much more than just enable supply chain security. So hopefully that was a little bit of a flavour for what RFID is about. There's obviously a lot more detail that sits behind this, and I definitely encourage everyone to come and visit our iLab in Pune in India to really understand and see a full simulation of RFID-enabled supply chains. It's really something you need to physically see to truly understand. But I hope that was a helpful
Thank you, Marcel.
input anyway, and I look forward to the questions on today's call.
All right, lovely. Thank you for that, Marcel. I think I had a masterclass on RFID. Thank you for that. Before I move on to asking some questions to the panelists, I have one final poll question. Which says, which industry will see the greatest impact of identification and authentication of technologies? So we have transport and logistics, banking and financial industry, retail, governments, and healthcare. So Anjali, if you could please run that poll question for us, please. All right, so the question is up. I'll give you about 20-30 seconds to do this. We jump on to a final part of the webinar. I'm curious to see some of these results that are going to come out. I mean, let's see. All right, Anjali, can we stop the poll? Okay. All right. Well, I was expecting a little bit more on retail, which kind of disappointed me. But anyway, 40% of you say healthcare, 31% of you say transportation and logistics, 19% say retail, 6% say banking and financial industry, and 3% in government. All right, so that's quite an interesting number to be in there. All right, thank you for that. So I would like to actually move on to the final part of our discussion, where I would like to ask some very specific questions that's been coming by. And I should say you have been one of those panels where we have been receiving so much of these questions, and I'm not so sure how much we can accommodate that. So for all the questions that have been answered, we'll make sure that we'll revert back to you. So first question that came from my side also I want to ask Nakul. What do you think will be the changes in the future supply chain, and how authentication technologies can help this? Nakul, can you kind of give us some light on that?
Sure, absolutely, Mani. I think as we move forward, when you look at supply chains, I mean, there are certain movements that are happening that I view as kind of unstoppable. For example, the rise of e-commerce for all kinds of products, including for medicines as well. Technologies such as kind of self-driving cars or trucks that are already, coming into their own in other countries will come into India as well. Drones. So supply chains are going to become more kind of, automated. I think a lot of efficiencies have to be driven into it. I think disaggregation is going to start happening as well. And when it comes to kind of authentication technologies and traceability in general, the way I look at it is that the concept of having a unique identity and knowing where the person is. I mean, today, we know where we are, right? As a person, we have a unique identity. In fact, we have many unique identities in India. Those of us that are in India, we have several identities. But Aadhaar can be viewed as kind of the ultimate unique identity. And if we want to know kind of where we are at any given time, we have exact GPS coordinates. So for those of you that don't know, you can go into a Google history and know exactly where you were at any given point in time, pretty much wherever you were. So I think that is going to happen for products as well. The idea of every saleable product having its own identity, I think is going to become more and more widespread. In fact, just one other statistic that I'd like to put out there, more than 70%, close to 75% of the world's pharmaceutical industry by volume either has or is in the process of implementing unique identification or serialization, as it's called, technology. So this concept is coming, it is inevitable, and the idea of being able to kind of track a product through the supply chain is going to be viewed, I believe, as something that is just inherent and basic in terms of supply chain. So I think the role that these technologies are going to play is kind of giving us increased visibility into where products are, being able to map the distribution of products to where the needs are, and being able to ensure that if there is a product that is diverted from where it's supposed to be, or a counterfeit product is infiltrated, being able to have a red alert on that and being able to take corrective action. I think in the next 2 years, we're going to start seeing that more and more.
Yeah. I know there are lots of questions coming in, but in the interest of time, I'm going to ask Mr. Dwivedi. So from a hospital perspective, I know you're doing a very important role right now, and my sincere appreciation for that. So when the supply chain is becoming disrupted, I mean, what will you do to ensure that the supply chain will go uninterrupted? I mean, I think it's a very critical element of this right now. I mean, the fight against COVID is even more important. What would you say that you would do to make sure the supply chain is not interrupted?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it all boils down to efficient planning. We must know how much we are going to need in a certain duration, right? Mm-hmm. Must have credible sources who are supplying. So having an efficient consumption analysis, having proper reorder levels in place, we already know that this is the material that I will be needing to run my operation for this much period. And then effectively planning to have long-term supply contracts with the sources. That combined will help in ensuring that our supply chain remains uninterrupted. Certain technology is very interesting, those are coming, that the moment some certain items are shipped for us, I receive a communication that this is the ID of the particular material that is coming to me. And then I have a technology to track on the way where that supply is, so that I know that this is the time that it is going to take to come and arrive my premises. Then a technology to authenticate whatever is coming to me. It is from the correct source, it is a correct ID, the same ID that was shipped to me. Combined together will ensure that there is no disruption.
Okay, lovely. There's another question that came through for a lot of his questions coming through from an RFID standpoint. Marcel, to you, and what are some of the solutions that we already seem available in the markets to handle this traceability and specifically in the pharma sector?
That's a good question, Manny. Look, I think what's evident is, after many years of evolution, RFID solutions there's pretty much an RFID solution for virtually every application. So it's really a matter of not reinventing the wheel, but actually helping guide and educate the industry to make the right decisions and select the right products to get the benefits that they are, that meet the needs that they're trying to address. So I guess that's where, that's the service that we would bring, and that's what we currently do. And we would make sure that we provide the level of education and knowledge build, and make sure that the right RFID product is selected for the right reasons, for the right application, because there are a lot of products, a lot of solutions. So that's where the expertise comes in, and that's where we, offering our services across the world, and we've done a lot of work in India for some time now, and we want to continue to do that. And really the reason we built the iLab in India is to really try and fast track that education, make sure that people get hands-on experience, test their actual products in a real life process without basing everything on theories or trying to replicate what happens in the US. So I think that's, for me, we're really going through that process of education, making sure we select the right products. We bring in our partners, our hardware partners, our software partners, to make sure that there is a total solution as well. It's not just a matter of buying an RFID label and hope it works. There's also the hardware component, as I mentioned, the reader. There's also typically some modification to software or integration of software to bring it all together. And you need that total solution for it to really work and deliver what I've just been sharing with the audience.
All right, thank you. Thank you on that. I know this. We reached the top of the hour, so probably what I'm going to ask my esteemed panelists, I'm just going to give you 1 minute. If you can just kind of give your kind of saying, look, if there's one thing that you want the viewers to take away, what would be that one important message that you want? Starting probably from our order, Mr. Nakul, start from you, please.
Thank you. I have been scrolling through some of the questions that have come up, and I want to kind of summarize by addressing some of the questions as well as giving my kind of overall view. As I mentioned, this is a huge problem, and that is getting bigger. The only question before us is, do we want secure supply chains? Do we want to protect the health and safety of people in our country or not? I believe most of us, if we took a poll right now, would say yes.
Yeah.
Now, if we say yes to that and we're committed to it, then I think we move on from there. Now, how do we address this? First thing, as I mentioned, is awareness. If I want to leave you with a message, it is be aware that you can be a victim of counterfeiting. I am in the industry. I've been in the industry for 10 years. I have been the victim of counterfeiting. Okay, so if you think that you're not going to be a victim of it, you're probably mistaken. The second thing is, yes, we have disaggregated supply chains. Yes, we have issues in terms of, fragmentation. How do we motivate retailers, wholesalers, even brands have their own challenges to deal with? The answer is that it can be done. So if you're a pharmaceutical manufacturer under price control and you're being pressured in terms of margins and you need that little bit of relief from the government in order to be able to implement solutions, I think the government should take that as a positive step and join hands in terms of encouraging and incentivizing companies to adopt it. If you're a wholesaler or a retailer and you have your own challenges, I think brands should work with you. I think that's where standardization comes in. So I don't have to, as a wholesaler or retailer, implement 10 different solutions. If I can implement one. That's how the standardization platform comes in. And if you're a consumer, then as a consumer, I think, again, awareness, and I think you have to be proactive in terms of demanding these kinds of solutions from your government, from the brands that you trust, and visiting those locations and giving the business to people that are taking those initiatives to protect you and your loved ones' health. So I think we all have to work together, but I think it is something that I come back to. If we believe it's a problem and we believe we want to solve it, we have to find a way to get there.
Thank you. All right. So awareness is one important thing that probably it stand out in my head. Mr. Dwivedi, what would be your concluding marks?
So my one-liner will be that we are really living in very interesting time.
Mm-hmm.
End consumers, our customers, our patients, they are all equipped with technologies, smartphones, and collaborate, way to communicate. This is also a time of social media. So healthcare really has to come up with leaps and bounds in implementing technology, and not only the hospitals, healthcare providers. In fact, the technology ecosystem itself has to evolve significantly to really meet this demand of the time.
Thank you. Lovely. So more usage of technology. All right, fantastic. From a standards perspective, Mr. Swaminathan, what would be your kind of concluding marks?
See, I see in the post-COVID situation, there is going to be tremendous cost pressure, across the entire chain. So I want to just say from my experience of, in this industry for more than almost close to 3 decades, if you do that, standards, increase the efficiencies and reduce cost. Definitely, as an industry, when you come together. And other very fundamental thing which I want to, the participants to take away today after the session is, see, whatever I put it in the framework of identify, capture, share, they all have been doing it across, knowingly or unknowingly. But I need to, want them to introspect and see whether they are putting it in a standardized way so that they are future ready for it. So that's what I wanted to do.
Thank you.
And the last one which I also wanted to do is more from the healthcare and other perspective. It needs to be, it should not be seen as a compliance requirement. It needs to be seen from a value differentiation point of view.
Got you. Thank you. Mr. Girish, what would be your takeaway from hospital perspective?
Yeah, my takeaway would be strict processes must be set and they should be followed. You should not circumvent or take any shortcuts to the processes which are set, because the loss is going to be very high if you try to circumnavigate or skip some of the processes, especially in the prices. And secondly, a good vendor management. As Mr. Dwivedi was saying, you should have good reorder levels, because inventory is a double-edged sword. Because having an inventory also is a liability, not having an inventory is a liability.
Exactly.
So if you have a good relation with your vendors who can supply at on a phone call, that would be the best. And also lastly, the management also should realize that they should invest more on this RFID and supply chain, because it's an intangible thing, but when the loss is there, it's huge, you can't quantify.
Thank you. So more technology implementation again, okay? That leads me to Mr. Marcel and Parsia. Marcel?
Thank you. I guess I just wanted to leave you with a thought or a little bit of homework, and that is, I've talked a little bit about RFID and how it can help, but I mean, you're hearing it from me maybe for the first time. I strongly encourage you to do your own due diligence, do your Google search, understand, who's using it and why, and you'll find that, oftentimes it's being used not just for high. There are pressures when there is a challenge on the cost of labor, for example. They want to make their process more efficient. That's where RFID comes into its own. And that's why companies in India today, with the same cost pressures as I guess the healthcare are facing, are adopting RFID. So as I said, we've got we can support. We're happy to hold your hand and walk you through the whole process and help you get enabled. But I also strongly suggest independently have a look at what your peers in other countries, and I think you'll see the ROI speaks for itself. So.
Thank you.
And thanks to the organisers, by the way. This has been a great session and a great way to use our time more effectively under COVID conditions, even in Australia. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So to all the panelists, thank you for your time. It has been wonderful, fantastic hearing your viewpoints. I quite enjoyed moderating this. And to all the viewers, we'll make sure that all the questions that you asked, probably we might not have answered everything today, but we'll make sure that we'll pass on your questions to the respective panelists, and we'll revert back to you with next possible steps in terms of answering your questions. And to me, I think this we are in this together, and I think this technology and standards as a measure to as a means to making sure that we secure the supply chain is all the more reason why we need to go for it. And with that, I will conclude this webinar, and thank you and have a fantastic day ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mani, and thank you, other co-panelists.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.